Hey y'all, it's Fan with Sewing with Tay, and today we're doing a beginner-friendly DIY tote bag. These are all the tools that you are going to need: 1.5 yards of fabric, preferably cotton, a sewing machine, and a few tools. I'm upcycling this bag out of an old dress, so this is why you'll see me kind of quickly just going through the cutting of the outside of the bag and the straps, and I just have white fabric for the interior, but here are the dimensions for the bag. 18 by 18, 4 by 26, but you can make this bag any size you want, bigger or smaller. So I went ahead and applied my interfacing to my two outside pieces of fabric. I didn't interface my straps this time, but you can if you want to. And then once you get your pieces interfaced, you're going to start cutting out a 2-inch square on the bottom corners only. See here, I have my 2-inch grid ruler. I'm just going to mark 2 inches up, 2 inches down, and then I'm going to cut that out. So here's what the self looks like. You're going to cut that square out of both layers, and then this is what it looks like. You're going to do it on the self fabric outside and the lining fabric. So you're going to have 2 and 2, 4 pieces all together. So here we are. I didn't do any prep for this tutorial before I actually started filming this. So I actually need to thread my machine, and as you will see later, my bobbin was not full, which is a rookie mistake. So I just put in, though I'm using white thread, I put in the white bobbin that I already had wound up instead of starting with a fresh bobbin. So here you'll see me putting my thread on the spool, putting it up through the thread guide, and I'm sure that all of you, know how to thread your machine if you're following along for my sewing tutorial. But you're going to put it through the tension dowel. Make sure you catch your hook up through the upper thread hole up here. I can't think of the name right now. I'm trying to blank. And then down through the needle. So first stitch will be sewing across the bottom of the bag, and I'm just sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure that I back stitch and just easily pushing through. It's a lot of straight stitches, nothing difficult about sewing this bag at all. So we're going to get the bottom stitch, make sure we clip our threads. I did not have my scissors. I told you guys I was not prepared. I had packed up everything today for a sewing class I was teaching, and I hadn't put anything back, but I did want to get this tutorial done. So once you get your bottom sewn, you're going to do the same thing. Back stitch on the side, sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance down both sides of the bag. I, again, was being lazy. I didn't use any pins or any clips. You don't really have to as long as your fabric was straight. Mine ended up being a little bit off. It was one side was just a little bit off. I was using the embroidery for like a guide, and it just ended up being just a smidge off. So I flipped my bag here so that I could see it better, and then I sewed it. So my bag has a stripe, and in my head, when I originally started doing this, I was like, oh, I'm gonna cut this out so the stripes are lined up, which I did. But when I got to sewing, I told y'all I didn't pin it. So my stripes wasn't matched all the way, which wasn't really my intent, but I thought, oh, that would be a nice thing if it was. So if you do have stripes or any type of directional print on your fabric, make sure that you are, following the way you want it to look, like matching your stripes or making sure your print's going the same way. So I'm going to repeat this same process for the lining, sewing the bottom and both the sides. Sewing both of those, you might want to take it to the sewing machine just to give it a little press pressure. Seams open, it would make your life a lot easier. To make sure your seams are pressed open for the next few steps. You do not have to by any means, but it just makes your project look a little bit nicer. So yeah, I'm going to finish sewing this, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which is sewing the corner or the miter of the bag. Actually, before I get to the miter, I'm gonna go ahead and start sewing my strap. I'm gonna speed it up here for a second because I couldn't remember which side was the right side of my fabric, so I got confused and it took me a second to get it back the way it should have been sewn. So I stopped sewing and I ended up taking out those couple of stitches, trying to figure out which side was the right side. It took me a few seconds, but I finally got it and then went back to sewing my strap. But remember, I told you guys I didn't prepare for this. I just sat at my machine and started sewing. You're gonna sew your strap with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but don't be like me. My bobbin runs out halfway through. I didn't notice, so I sewed this whole thing until I got to the end and realized, oh, there are no stitches. So I am gonna wind my bobbin and redo the strap. So yeah, you see me here clipping my thread, and I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna head over and wind my bobbin real quick and then rethread my sewing machine so that I am prepared to finish sewing this bag today. Typically, when I am sewing a project, I usually go ahead and I wind 2 bobbins. I didn't do that this go around. I didn't think I would use as much thread as I did, but here we are. Back to the strap. So it is folded in half with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. It is a straight stitch. Back to what I said before, there's no really crazy stitching on this bag, literally just straight stitches. And then you're going to clip your threads. A clean garment is a happy garment. You're going to take your loop turner, that's what I'm using, or you can use a safety pin or whatever other method you want to use, and you're going to flip your straps so that the right side is facing out. And this is an opportunity for you to go and press it. I did not go press it at this time because I was a little bit distracted about having to rewind my bobbin. But once you get it pulled in to the right side out, you're going to add a top stitch. Personally, on my own tote bags, I like to add 2 rows of top stitch. So I fold the edge where the seam is and I sew a 1/4 inch or so from the edge all the way down. And then once I finish sewing that side of the strap, I like to go to the side that has the fold and then also do another 1/4 inch on that side of the strap. I think it makes it a little bit sturdier and it just makes it feel nice, makes it feel a little bit more elevated. You do not have to do that. You don't have to top stitch your strap at all. This is just my preference and how I like to do it. All right, we have sewn our straps. Now we're going to get into the miter. In my opinion, the miter is the only difficult part of this bag. You're going to open up that square and you're going to match your bottom seam to your side seam. So just pull it out just like I am. Open up your seam allowance and make sure that your seams match. I'm going to try to give you guys a close up here. There you see the side seam and the bottom seam are together. I'm actually going to use a pin for this. So I'm going to pop a pin right in that seam to make sure that it's being held. And then you're just going to sew a 1/2 inch along the edge. Super easy, but it does take you to have a little bit more experience to kind of get this part. But the cutting out the 2-inch square makes it super easy versus some other methods that people use. So this is the only difficult thing about this bag to me. So you're going to do this on both sides and to your lining. Yay, we have a little bag. It's super cute. I love this print, y'all. I hadn't planned on really making this bag out of this fabric, but it's just been sitting on the shelf doing nothing. So I'm like, oh, this would be a cute DIY. So here is the outside of your bag. And then I'm going to also do this for my lining. So here is my lining. I'm going to pop out those corners at the bottom miter, and this is right side out. So my seam allowances are inside, but actually for this process, I like to keep the lining with the seams out. So you see here my seam allowances are out and the right side of the fabric is on the inside of the bag. I'm going to take the right side of my outside layer and put it inside the lining. So right side of the lining facing right side of the bag. Your seam allowances should be on the outside of the bag and on the very interior of the bag. And then you're going to match your side seams, opening them up. If you press them, this would be super easy. I did not press them. Pop a pin in it. This is when the pins come in handy because you have to control a couple layers of fabric. So you're going to do this on both sides, making sure that your seams are matching. And then you'll put a couple pins in between, leaving a space because you have to put your straps in between these 2 layers. All right, the straps are done already. So we're going to take these and we're going to put them 2 inches from the side seams. So you'll see me grab some tape. Again, I didn't know where my tape was because I packed everything from my sewing class and I didn't know what I did with it after that. So I have some extra ones laying around, but they're not my favorite tape measure. I'm sure y'all know how that goes. But I found a tape sitting next to me on my little cart here, and I went to go mark 2 inches from the side seam. That's where your strap will go. You're going to put the raw edge of your strap to the raw edge, top edge of your bag, pinning it to the right side of the fabric, and then you're going to kind of tuck it inside and pin the lining to it as well. So that strap is going to be sandwiched between the right sides of the lining and the exterior fabric. And you want to make sure your strap isn't twisted, so make sure that it's straight on the inside. You see me kind of pulling it here just to make sure that it's not twisted in there. And you're going to pin it to the other side. I got my tape there to measure 2 inches from the seam because you don't want uneven straps. And then you're going to pin it and then pin the lining right side and the outside right side to the strap, and making sure that the strap raw edge is aligned with the top raw edge of the self fabric that's on the outside and the lining. And then you're going to do that for both sides of the bag, making sure to tuck your straps down and out the way, because the last thing you need is to sew over your straps and have to take it out to do it again. So instead of speeding this up, I'm gonna walk through it again just to make sure you guys get it because I feel like this part can be confusing. You're going to leave open 3 to 4 inches. See this big gap between my pins here? You want to leave that open so that you can pull your bag right side out. But you're going to sew that 1/2 inch from one pin all the way around to the other pin. And you see here, my straps are in between the two layers and out of the way of my stitching line. So I'm going to go right into my stitching. I'm going to start on the right side, so all the way down and around to the left side. Making sure not to sew my straps. Yeah, I cannot say that enough. Do not sew your straps. It's not a big deal. You just gonna have to take it out and do over. There's no quick fix for sewing your straps. So actually, I started on the left side. I'm sorry, y'all. Y'all can see it, and I'm just trying to remember what I did. We gonna start on the left side, sew all the way around. I choose to walk slash sew over my pins. I think it's a personal choice. You technically should pull your pins out when you sew, but sometimes I just like to keep them there, but then you have to go back and take them out afterwards. So it's whatever is easiest for you. And you're just going to continue to sew around this circle. My fabric got a little bunched up, so I had to kind of make it fit, but it's okay because it was just the lining and it'll get adjusted when we have to edge stitch later on down the aisle. So again, 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the top edge, making sure to sew through the lining, the exterior self fabric, and the straps, but not through the straps, meaning the lower part, just through the top edge of your strap. You're going to clip your threads, you're going to pull out your pins, and then once you get that all situated, you can choose to trim the seam. I did not decide to trim the seam for this video, but it is also something that can make your bag look more neat and more professional. If you need a tutorial on what I'm talking about, leave me a comment and I would do that. But you have your opening that we left there, and we're going to go inside and just start pulling the bag out of this hole so that the right side of your fabric is now on the outside. So you keep pulling and eventually we will stuff the lining inside of the bag. So you'll see it's coming to fruition here. And then once you get it all out, then you can start stuffing the lining back inside of the bag. The next and final step is the top stitch because we need to close up the hole that we left open at the top to be able to sew our fabric. And actually, you don't have to leave your hole here. You can leave your hole at the side seam. I just kind of like leaving my hole here. But that's a personal choice. You can stick it in the bottom, leave the bottom open so that you can the opening will be in the bottom of the bag and not the top edge, but I think it still looks pretty clean to me when I go and put an edge stitch up here. So I'm not that concerned about it. But if you want to see other ways to flip your bag or turn your bag inside out, I can show you other places you can put your opening so that you can still do that. So here we are, the final step. We're going to edge stitch, meaning very close to the edge. I'm using it's like a zipper foot, but I like to use it all the time, but it's like a quarter of an inch wide. So I like to just put that on the edge of whatever it is that I'm sewing. For this instance, the edge of the top of the bag, pulling your straps to the top, as you can see here, so that it will be stitched up and not stitched down, if that makes sense. And making sure that you are in fact stitching the opening that you use to pull the bag inside out, making sure that you're stitching it closed, because that is the most important part of this process. So you will see me sewing right along the edge, very close to the edge. I think at one point I might have came off the edge a little bit and I was like, oh no, but it went right back. So we're gonna put a stitch right along the top edge to hold your straps up. That's why we pull the straps down and up. You see how we're pulling it, pushing the lining in and pulling the strap up so that it is stitched up. And then that pretty much is it. You see how I almost sewed my strap there? I had to push it back in there because no ma'am. We're gonna cut them threads because they was doing a little bit too much. And then we're gonna finish sewing this, making sure that our lining isn't gonna peek out, but it's white so you can barely see it. So that is it. Give it a good press and your bag is officially done. This came out so cute. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. Maybe I'll gift it to someone. It's just a very cute, any day, anytime, like throw a bunch of stuff in here, bag. It's a little bit on the smaller side, but you can make this bag in any size. Thanks so much for sewing with me. Please like, subscribe, follow all of the things. Follow me on social media at the Emporium and stay tuned for the next set of sewing tutorial and newsletter.